Hi, everyone. Welcome to the webinar, Resilient Workforce Strategies in the Era of Industry 4.0. I am Silvia Moreno, and today I have the pleasure to be surrounded by prominent figures in manufacturing and workforce management. I am together with Gilles Sebrechts, Henrik von Schiel, and Gordon Gilkinson. So let me introduce the speakers very briefly. Henrik is named as the most influential futurist of the century that ignited the digital and Industry 4.0 themes. He is a professor of strategy management with 20 years of experience in the strategy and future studies. He has also co-authored 153 business architecture and IT papers, and his work has impacted 24 nations and the 23% of the Fortune 500 most influential companies. So thank you, Henrik, for being here with us today. We also have Gilles Sebrechts. He's Executive Vice President at SDWorks, leading workforce management solutions, international marketing, international markets, and SAP solutions. And he has more than 10 years of experience in change management and digital transformation, while he drives innovation and operational excellence globally. And last but not least, we have Gordon. Welcome, Gordon. He is the head of EMEA at Workforce Software, and he has more than 20 years of expertise in workforce management and business transformation. So thank you, gentlemen. I would like to start with Henrik. Henrik, would you be so kind to walk us through the concept of Industry 4.0 and also the 8 stages of the revolution?
My name is Henrik von Schiel, and I'm going through with you what is the human aspect in terms of the fourth industrial revolution, why is it important, and I'm excited to be here. I'm actually quite humbled, so let's dive deep in it straightforward. The fourth industrial revolution in 2008, I was asked by the German government to help them in the recession time to find out how to find out growth and productivity. And normally when the government is struggling, you're focusing on productivity to grow. So Henning Kagermann, which is the co-founder of SAP, and Professor Scher, who's the co-founder of Processes, we were looking at in terms of what is happening in the world. And we realized there quite fast when you have your phone, we realized that your phone was in 2008 not the same that your phone is today. Your phone was divided into, you had an internet, you had a phone, and you had big data, and all of this collided into one aspect suddenly. We call that digitalization. So we did the digitalization strategy for Germany. Germany was excited, the European Union was excited. We call that the digital agenda, all the countries should implement it. That's what we call the digital revolution today. And quite after a short period, we realized it's not 5 trends that are colliding, it's 77 mega trends that are colliding together. And in that aspect, we realized it's changing fundamentally aspects of our life. How we consume, how we work, how we interact, how our economy works in a faster period of time than ever before. That's probably, if you listen to my voice, most of you feel anxious around society today. You feel that everything is changing. Everything is a little bit unhinged. That's called the fourth industrial revolution. That's where we are in today. The focus I want to have with you today is a little bit on people, because the centerpiece of the fourth industrial revolution is people. And when you look at the slide, the first industrial revolution was about organizing workforce and replacing physical aspects, automating physical aspects. The second revolution was a simpler line, also organizing workflows and automation. The link between digitalization and the third and the second industrial revolution was actually the automation. So also the physical replacement, but the human physical replacement. Before it was PS, it was machines, all of this. And what we see coming now in the fourth industrial revolution is the mental replacement. So not only the physical automation, but the digital and the virtual aspects that they're being automated. So what we will discuss today is the rehumanization on how can you rehumanize an organization to be resilient for the future. So when you look at the next slide, you see the 77 megatrends. And what makes it a little bit unique, the 77 megatrends are colliding together fundamentally from all aspects. So 17 of them are technology trends. You have 4 workforce trends, which are connectivity, diversification, and mobility and connectivity. So what you see in these mega trends, that they are colliding together and they're creating an exponential change in every aspect of our life. And part of this is coming out in 8 evolutionary stages. So the fourth industrial revolution, the centerpiece is the human, and the human is the centerpiece because humans have the ability to adapt. And because we have the ability to adapt, we have the ability to adapt to changes that comes. So how an organization works today, you build skills in people and expertise that creates capabilities. Capabilities combined with software, combines with hardware, combines with tools, creates other capabilities that create competencies. Now here's the cheeky thing. Competencies you cannot model. Competencies is the competitive force that you are competing with in a market, but you can model and change your capabilities. And this is where you use software aspects to it, digitalization aspects to it, and all of this. So when you look at this slide of the 8 evolutionary stages, the first one is the digitalization. So digitalization is connectivity of elements. So look at this not like it's happened in 2008 and it's finished. No, it happens in phases and supports the other evolution as they move along. So today we will discuss a little bit later how digitalization is coming towards its second phase. And we call it digitalization 2.0. And then we have technology revolution. Technology revolutions, if you haven't heard about AI, the automation of intelligence, that's one of the 17 pillars. You have robotics, you have all of these aspects, and they are supporting that the organization becomes digital, so connected, and you can share information. They become smart. Smart is the leverage point for resiliency. And then intelligence, which is the growth enabler. Then we are moving towards the sustainability revolution. This is, if you have looked a little bit in the press, all countries around the world has agreed on the Paris Agreement, on the Kyoto Agreement. That means they have agreed on scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3, how to save the planet, how companies can compensate for that, what their focus needs to be. And that's, by the way, I've been part of that in the European Union. I should say that's a very strong plan. We are on a good path to be in harmony with the environment and live in that. So, and then today, we are in the economic revolution. That's the biggest one of all. So if you haven't heard the news yesterday, US announced tariffs on everybody. So tariffs is a reset of the economic system and the monetary system. It will affect every manufacturer. So this is resetting the pillars of how our money works, the fiat money, the monitoring system, how we get loans, how manufacturing is financed. All of these pillars is fundamentally changing every aspect of us. What we're moving towards, I'm going through the next one very short, is the biorevolution. Biorevolution comes by 2030. The biorevolution is, think about it like this: the future of food, the future of medicine, nanotechnology, biotechnology, all merging together in now. So when you see it here, now the data is here. In 3-4 years, the data will be part of your body. That means your DNA, your molecules can carry data. You will be interacting with the environment around you. That means everything of our reality, of how we see things, of how we communicate things, is changing fundamentally. So that's why the biorevolution will be the biggest revolution that comes, the link between IT and you as a human being. And after that, we come to the consumer revolution. The consumer revolution is when the biorevolution has emerged. We're moving towards the evolution where you are not the product anymore, but you have an element around you, protective, it's called Web 3.0, that you can monetize your data on how you consume and where you are. We can also call it the book of life and many things, but it changes the behavior of how we consume. So today you are the product, and by then this changes around. Then we move to the two other remaining ones, which is the fusion revolution, where energy will be free, water will be abundant, and then we move into the quantum revolution. That's a big longer one, that's a big heavy one. But in reality, if you hear about Industry 5.0 and you go to ChatGPT, it gives you 5.0, 6.0, 8.0. In reality, ChatGPT nonsense. If we're not surviving until 2050, these phases that are coming, we are not being able as a society to function. So what is the core thing of this? The core thing is the human being. We need to rehumanize the way that we function. The other core element to it is that manufacturing is always the centerpiece of the fourth industrial revolution. Around 35% of the global market is manufacturing. If you invest $1 in manufacturing, you get around $2.69 back. So it's a really good investment. So the backbone of all our workforce is manufacturing. And manufacturing is also the one place that has the core ability to operate, to grow. But the operation to grow is that when we focus on rehumanizing the organizations. Today we have some kind of an obsession with AI. And AI is a tool that transforms an organization at the core, but in reality we need a people strategy to apply AI the right way. So that moves me to the next slide, which is actually manufacturing.
Yeah, I had a question about this one actually, Henrik, if I may. If you look at workforce management solutions and workforce management software, which is our bread and butter, I would say we see a lot of those trends as well and a lot of the elements you describe. But where would you say the manufacturing industry is today and the software is today? On which part of that trend are we at the moment?
So what you see here is the mega trends for manufacturing. And the mega trends for manufacturing is actually the key driving force. Can I get the slide back maybe? So they're the key driving force for manufacturers in terms of how they are able to grow. So what has happened today with manufacturing that hasn't happened before? They have an ability to operate, to grow. And so the first element they're focusing on, how are they creating productivity to operate, to grow. So of course they're focusing on AI, on digitalization, connected workers, smart workers, connect them together. They want to focus on how to use APIs to get the information. They want to focus on extended reality. So most of this is technology driven for the assembly line, for the warehouse management, for them to source the product smarter, to do all of this. So within this element, productivity is the biggest possibility they have. So productivity, 55% of manufacturers have an opportunity for productivity increase. So the first step, if you ask me, if they haven't got an ERP system, they need an ERP system so they can automate what they do, define how they do it and automate what they do, right? So that's where they need to plan the sourcing they have, they need to plan the scheduling they have, they need to incent their people in a smart way, right? Then you have the resilience part, and that's where Gordon is coming in, right? The resilient part is your sweet spot. The resilient part is if they can save 20 to 30% in productivity, which they can with you, then they can move towards resiliency. Resiliency is how do you stay stable in an environment that is changing. So you cannot grow with productivity, you can grow with resiliency. So how do you, how are you resilient? Resiliency consists of one key element. How do you manage risk? Risk of forecast planning, risk of people management, risk of getting the right people for the right job, placing them the right place. How do you incent them the right way? How do you make sure that you're compliant with the regulations? And how do you make sure that you are able to train them to do all of this? In reality, these are just one words for future work, right? So this is actually the key element that Gordon is in. That is in resiliency.
Yep, exactly. And thanks for that, Henrik. I mean, it's clear that having a motivated, skilled, dependable workforce is a key pillar of resilience within the workforce. Without them, you're not going to produce anything. But when I speak to HR leaders and operational leaders, they're telling me that the biggest challenge for manufacturing, and not just manufacturing, this is pretty much across all verticals in 2025, is the ability to attract and retain talent. So how can a workforce management solution help you to attract and retain talent? That's one of the challenges that we get asked. Let me give you a very simple example that illustrates this perfectly. I have two sons, both at university in Manchester, and to fund their studies or to fund their lifestyle, they both took part-time jobs. One took a job with a faceless international hotel chain, and the other one took a job with a small family-run restaurant, which was always in the top 5 in Manchester. It got international plaudits. They had a succession plan for him as he came out of university. He was doing hospitality. But one day, the other sibling showed him an app that he had that was given to him by the international hotel chain, and that app allowed him to pick the shifts that he worked. And immediately, the other one jumped ship, because that was far more important to him at that time to be able to manage his studies, his personal life, than it was to have a succession plan or a career plan with a fantastically run restaurant. So that's a very simple example of how important providing people with the right tools for their job can be in terms of attracting talent. So how do we become an employer of choice? Everyone expects to have consumer-grade mobile apps these days. We talk about the Gen Zs, but I'm 58 years old. I expect to have consumer-grade technology to do my job. I do my expenses on my mobile app. Everyone's expecting the same thing. And also, 80% of the workforce is deskless, particularly in manufacturing, but that's globally. But there's only 1% of the IT spend spent on 80% of the workforce. Now, we need to improve that, so to lift that engagement, because that's what it's all about. If you can get an engaged employee into the workforce, if you're an employer who has highly engaged employees, you're going to become attractive. And that's through things like allowing the employee to be more involved within those workforce management processes, have a say in how they are scheduled, offer to work additional shifts, offer to swap shifts, manage the time off much better, manage their availability, all done through a mobile app. I mean, a Gallup poll here, I'll just read the numbers. So Gallup saying that those companies that have highly engaged employees will report 22% increase in productivity. It just happens. So once we've got that workforce in place, by becoming an employer of choice, by offering these tools, incentivizing people to come and work for us, how do we retain that talent? So poor workforce management will lead to attrition. If you run an exit survey, you might find that typically what we hear is about a quarter of the people who leave an organisation will do so because of poor workforce management practice. Now, what does that mean? It's things like having short notice shift changes. It's things like not getting my leave approved at a time that's suitable for me. It's about things like having being asked to work when I'm not available, and so on. So in isolation, all of those things may be irritating, but combined and collectively and cumulatively, that then becomes a burning issue, and then that can lead to attrition. So a good workforce management tool will ensure that that employee can become a lot more engaged in those processes, can get timely responses to the time off requests, can offer to work shifts at a time that suits them, and then with more fair and predictable scheduling, which we'll come on to, the guarantee that when they're told they're going to work, that's when they're working, so it doesn't upset their home life and family life. The other thing that we're seeing to help aid resilience is around forecasting and scheduling. When we look at forecasting, so typically we would see requests for RFPs coming for a workforce management solution from manufacturers. It would typically consist purely of time management, time and attendance. Now, there would always be an element of scheduling associated with that, but it was always fairly straightforward basic scheduling. Populate my timesheet with shifts because I need to pay against that and compare. But what manufacturers are starting to realise now is there is a need for more sophisticated scheduling, demand-based scheduling, skill-based scheduling, to unlock some of that additional benefit. Traditionally, manufacturers need to keep a production line running. They will increase that headcount just in case there was some sort of disruption, whether that be unexpected absence or some other disruption. And they had reserve there in hand to make sure that they could fill that gap. What they're looking at now is having a more flexible organisation that's upskilled, so people will be learning additional skills so they can be there to cover that disruption. They're looking at having more flexible working schemes, so that could be, for example, annualised hours or net contract hours, where you would be guaranteed so many hours a year, but you would have some hours in reserve, again, so that I could pull on those hours to cover those disruptions or unexpected events. Then we also have at the other side of the other end of the scale, if you take FMCG, let's take a food manufacturer with short shelf life product, you know, they'd be looking to match their demand profiles with those of their customers. So those with the grocery chains that they supply to make sure they're getting that product there just in time. That's a whole different scheduling problem to solve. It's not working on your traditional shift patterns, your DuPont shift cycles or whatever it might be. It's a much more flexible workforce. And whether you have an annualised hour scheme or whether you have something that's a lot more flexible, you must have the tools in place to be able to manage that and monitor it as it goes on.
Yeah. And is it fair to say there also, Gordon, I think there's where the more traditional AI, if that even existed, but it exists already for a while, like machine learning comes in as well in the back of our tooling, because you have so many parameters now in that scheduling, in that planning that you need to bring together that it's impossible in the traditional way where a planner does it almost on paper. So you need to collide that big data and come to the optimal solution.
Absolutely. You know, that generation of your demand, of your headcount, the amount of data now that's available, if you're talking about food production, for example, you need to take into account seasonality. You're talking about Easter, for example, you're talking about Christmas, you need to take into account customer promotional events, but not just for a single customer. You've got multiple customers. You've got to feed all of that into the machine, and that machine's got to learn so they can then have a demand that makes sure you're getting your product out to, if you're not providing, this is about providing your customer with a good level of service. Now we'll hark back to the food production side. If I walk into any large grocery retailer's headquarters, one of the first things I will see in the foyer is who are the heroes and who are the villains in the supply chain. And it's there for everyone to see, not just the employees, but for everyone that walks into that head office. That causes reputational damage. So what this is about is making sure that you're aligning your workforce with that demand, and that demand is aligned with your customer to optimize that level of service. The final part of the jigsaw is what we call time management. Time management has traditionally been time and attendance. It's there to make sure people are paid correctly, because again, that goes back to that whole employee engagement piece. You must make sure that's one of the fundamental building blocks. You know, when we talk about engagement, one of the core aspects of it, and the highest expectation, is that we'll get paid correctly. Some of the collective agreements that are in place within manufacturing organisations throughout EMEA are some of the most complex in the world. Every employee will understand it, and they will know exactly what they're supposed to be paid. But when that pay slip comes, it's incorrect because they have legacy systems that haven't been able to cope or keep up with changes in collective agreements, changes in legislation. So that's why you end up with an RFP for a new time management system, one that's flexible enough to cope and maintain those changes in agreements. But actually, what we see is time management is so much more than that. Time management or workforce management is actually now a repository for myriad data. You know, data relating to your business, historic sales information, production information, productivity information, information around your employee, information around behaviours, absenteeism, whether you've worked more unplanned overtime than you should, whether you're potential for experiencing burnout. So once we have all that data, how can we then use it? How can we couple it with AI to make sure we guarantee further the resilience of that workforce, I suppose, is a question.
And for me, that's a very interesting move, and it comes a bit back before I jump in the AI. I think to the slide of Henrik where he showed the fact that we go from process to workflow. You describe it as well. We first had productivity with time. It just had to be right, and time and attendance was. We automated time to money. That was what we were doing. If I hear you now, Gordon, and I agree with that, we're going way more into involving the employees in the journey, optimizing their workflow, their experience, and making sure that that workforce is engaged. And that for me is the big move that we're making. Then I think as a company, if you look at how we use AI, there's, we've written it down here on the slide, and the menu is not a meal. Everyone hears about AI. I think everyone has seen it in the newspaper, on the television, and people are also using it. Henrik, you told me up front, IT managers nowadays, they use it to get funding. And so they write in every project, it's an AI project. So the slogan we use is it's between hope and hype. We see big potential, but we also need to make sure that we really use the AI to the extent it can be used. And for me, it starts first with the data and the fact that we talked about the machine learning. It's not the most sexy AI. It's not Gen AI, the last versions that we've seen. But now that we have all that data, or when we have all that data, because that's an important point, that machine learning, that computational power can really help us forward in a lot of the things to build resilient companies, to build resilient workforces. You mentioned, I think, absence management, fatigue management. Having a model that continuously identifies where the hotspots are in your company, where you see that people are structurally going in overtime, or when you can start to have relational insights on if we do this, then we have a higher chance of burnout in the future, for example, that really builds a resilient workforce. If we can have that data, if we can have those insights. So for me, that's one of the big frontiers where we will see a next step in the coming months and years for the companies that have the basics right. Because you can have all the models you want and all the computational power you need. If you don't have the data, if the basics are not right, if the data is not there, you can't do anything. So for me, that's really a starting point, and that's where I see that AI will come in. On the other side, I think you mentioned the FMCG and the seasonality of demand, right? So manufacturers, I think, are continuously exposed to that seasonality of demand, and sometimes that's predictable, sometimes it's short-term shifts in demand that you see. To make sure that you can then plan the right workforce and that you can react quick enough, that's again, I think, where AI comes in. AI scheduling, AI planning can really be a key there to react quickly. If you look at it from a reactive point of view, it's to react quicker. It just goes faster than a human that needs to plan. But if you then start thinking proactively, which is also what I liked about your story, Henrik, if we think more ahead, based on all that data, you can start building those forecasting insights on, okay, but what is happening in the market? What are the trends we see? How do we then need to build a workforce for the future? How do we reskill? How do we retrain? How do we make sure that we take the workforce we have today to a level that it needs to be in 2-3 years' time, that we can deliver on the promises towards our customers? So for me, that's a bit the fundamentals of how AI will come in workforce management, and how we can leverage all the data that we've had, both on a personal level, but also from a manufacturing point of view or a financial point of view, that we match capacity and demand in a more proactive way. And then even when there are shocks, because there will always be shocks, I think, if someone would have told us a year ago we would have tariffs all across the world, I might not have believed it. You might have seen it coming, but I wouldn't have seen it coming. So we need to react quick. That's also where AI comes in, I think.
Yeah. And Gilles, if I may add, it's always difficult to tell what you're doing differently, right? So one thing that you're certainly doing differently in the market, I'm quite familiar with most manufacturers, right? Manufacturing is about productivity. You can enable them to manage their productivity level. Most have some sort of automation of the software. If they don't do it, that's the first step to get to the basics. Within these basic elements, there's a huge potential to save up to 20 to 30% on your productivity in placing the right person at the right time to deliver the right job, right? But the sweet spot that you have is that you can help here, but you can move them to the next level where it's resilience, right? Productivity is about automation, that's AI, right? Resiliency is about risk management, right? And in situations like today in an environment with tariffs, with high energy costs, all of this, right? Manufacturing only needs three things: access to natural resources, access to people, workforce, and access to market. If the market is disrupted by tariffs, if the market is disrupted by high energy prices and all of this, then the one thing that you can be resilient on, resilient means you're stable on it, is the workforce you have, right? So the workforce is the one thing where you are unique in, right? Productivity is about automating a software in a process. Resiliency is how do you link the training, the whole compliance element, the talent management, that you're not a talent taker, but you're talent maker, that you enable to incent them the right way, that you can plan the right way, your scheduling, that you can do all of this. This creates the resiliency if the fight for talent gets more challenging, right? And the unique thing that you do in digitalization, you focus normally on processes. That's what you do. That's normally what you do with the ERP system and SAP. You are focusing on how you do it in the resiliency. So that's the workflow. So that makes you by design unique, because every manufacturer needs to go to digitalization 2.0. That's the workflow. So of anybody of you in manufacturing who wouldn't know, but you know this because you've listened to me many times, 70% of the organization needs to be optimized in terms of productivity. That's non-core. 15% of the organizations is core differentiating. This is where you compete with your competition head on hand. That's supply chain management. That's warehouse management. That's what makes you unique. This is where you focus on workflows. This is where you position the right scheduling, the right pricing, the right people. This is where you win the battle. So that's the short version.
Yeah. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for the amazing conversation, the insights that were shared here. So I appreciate your time. Thank you very much again for making the time to be here, and again for the conversation. I hope to see you again.
With pleasure. Thank you, Silvia.
Thank you.
All right, so we have reached the end of the webinar. Thank you for watching. I hope that you find it insightful and that you can take information that is valuable for you and your organization. Keep in touch. If you need to know anything, you can visit sdworks.com or reach out to us via our different social networks. And thank you again, and I wish you a nice day.